Welcome to What's Going On, the weekly podcast and videocast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of What's Going On. I'm Pastor Katie here at First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota, and I'm so glad you could join me for this episode. For this episode, we're going to continue to talk about the theme of acting with creativity, which was the theme of the worship service this past Sunday, our kickoff Sunday. Shout out to everybody who came to our 10 o'clock worship service and to our meal and events following. It was really fun to kind of be gathered together and have a mixed style worship. If you didn't get to see that, you can always go back online and watch the recording of it on our YouTube and on our church page. But just want to especially thank our Parish Care and Outreach Committee for doing the meal and getting that ready to go, and to Tiffany and all of her volunteers in youth and children's ministry for getting the activities and things ready to go. This is our big week where literally everything is coming back. And so that's really exciting. This coming Wednesday, we will have 605 kicking off once again, which for me will be the first time ever that I'm getting to kind of be around for that, although I will be teaching confirmation starting Wednesday night as well from 6 to 7. And so I'll see a little bit of it, but then we also have our Kingdom Chimes, which is the first time they're coming back, along with our adult bells, our adult choir. It's going to be a busy night, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's fun when the church is just buzzing with activity and people, and yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be great. But I wanted to continue on this theme of acting with creativity as the church, because I think it's a really important theme for us right now as we continue to figure out how to be the church, especially in a time where unfortunately the pandemic hasn't ended yet, where we're still more divided than ever in our country, where people are just kind of over things and frustrated and tired, and how do we be the church? How do we meet people where they are? How do we meet people in their needs? How do we continue to spread this message of love, hope, and acceptance? It causes us to really think through the ministry that we choose to spend our time and energy on. What are new things that we can be doing? What are ways that we can adapt what we're already doing? And what are things that maybe we need to let go and thank God for the ministry that they've had. But before I really kind of dive into more of that, I thought it would be kind of fun to do another sort of creative activity. I'm not the most creative person by any means, but it's kind of a fun way to get yourself thinking about things in a different way. And so Sunday with the children, I used a paperclip and said, what are ways that we can use a paperclip that is not what it was intended for? And it was actually interesting to me how the kids really had a hard time kind of breaking out of the box. I mean, they said, you can clip papers together. I said, great. And then they said, you can clip more papers together. Absolutely. You can poke holes in papers. And it was like, they're very stuck in one way of thinking, which how often is that true for us in the church, where we kind of get stuck in one way of doing things and our variation is really the same thing over and over again. And it was interesting at our staff meeting today, we were talking about the paper clips and some of the different ways that we have come up with using paper clips, and then beginning to start to translate that into the life of the church, as far as how can we adapt things that we have. How can we use the resources that we have in a new way, or in an interesting way, or in a way that meets a need that we have? So this is, again, another just kind of little fun activity. I would invite you, if you want, you can do it too. If you have access to you as you're watching this or listening to this, I don't know why I did the phone thing. Probably most of you would be wearing headphones if you're listening to this, but I just want you to grab a blank piece of paper and a pen. And the first thing I want you to do is just to scribble. Just scribble around on the paper. So I'm going to do that right now. So you're not making any sort of specific shape, you're just making scribbles. And you're not trying to do anything right now, you're just trying to fill up the space. So I'm going to show you my scribbles. I'm using a scratch piece of paper here, so see, just regular scribbles all over the paper. Now here comes the fun, maybe challenging part for you. So I want you to start looking into your scribbles and seeing if something appears. Is there something that you see, a shape that comes out of it? And I'm going to use a marker, but you can just use whatever writing utensil you've been using. And then once you find a shape of something, I want you to outline it. So this is actually really hard to do as I'm talking, but let me just see what I can find. And it can be whatever you want. So, you know, there's, with being creative, so much of it is kind of letting yourself try things out. Letting yourself go, you know, this is kind of what I see, and it might not be what you've seen, but it's what I see. This is an interesting one. Okay, so this is the shape that I pulled out of it. That's kind of a weird shape, right? It's but I'm going to tell you what I saw. I'm going to finish drawing it. So once you've got the outline of your shape, I want you to now kind of finish your drawing of what it is. I'm not even sure with the drawing if you're going to be able to know what I saw in this, so bear with me here. I am not an artist. Can we just put that out there right now? I am not an artist by any shape of the imagination. Oh my gosh. There's part of me right now that's hoping that you're listening to this as a podcast and don't go and try to find it on YouTube later. But all right, so I created that shape, and what I saw was just kind of a fat horse. And so I drew little legs, I drew eye, and that's the ear. It looks kind of like a duck horse. I'm not an artist. And then I drew the saddle on it right here. This is the saddle, if you couldn't tell, which I wouldn't blame you if you couldn't. Now, if you do this activity along with me, one, your scribble's going to look different than mine. Two, the thing that you saw within it is going to look different. Even if you were looking at the same scribble that I made, you would probably see something different than what I saw. My guess is probably 100% you're going to see something different than I saw. But that's okay. And that's kind of what we're doing at the church is we all have this, we're looking at the same thing, but we're all seeing very different things within it. We're all seeing different possibilities within it. And that's part of that acting in a creative process is, you know, looking at the church and saying, I really see we have a lot of resources in this area. I really see that we have a lot of people who are passionate in this area. I really see a need that we can meet in this way. And that's part of the reason that we all work together as the church, and that the church is all of us. It's not just those of us on staff. It is all of us working together to accomplish the mission for God, because the reality is, when we're all acting creatively, when we're all looking at what the church is and what it can do, we're going to see different things. And we're going to see different possibilities, and we're going to see different ways that God is moving and that God is calling us. And that's great, and that's what we need, especially as we move forward and who we want to be as the church. It's important for us to always be asking those questions of, what is it that we're doing great? What is it that there's a need for that we're not meeting right now? Or what kind of resources do we have that we can use to God's glory? And the more that we work together, the more that we have more brains on this, the more that we have more voices that are speaking up and saying, hey, what about this? What about this? I think the more we're going to live into God's mission for our life. As the pastor, you know, sometimes people think that that's my job alone, is to set the vision and the course of the church. But the reality is, it's my job to serve the church and to be listening to all of you and to be taking in what you're saying and kind of synthesizing it and helping us move forward. And doing the best I can in leading where I see need and where I see possibility. But again, I'm not the only one that should be looking, because frankly, I mean, look at this. Do you want this to be the person who's... I see some weird things sometimes. And sometimes, you know, it's because God has called me to see the things that I need to see. But I also believe that God has called you to see the things you need to see, and to be creative and to not be afraid to share what is on your heart or what is on your mind. And I do believe that we are entering into a time of great possibility within the church. It's a time of challenge as well, for sure, but any time of challenge comes with a possibility. And one of the things in the last year that I felt God was really showing me as I looked into the church was a need for us to be more adaptive in how we make decisions in our leadership. So as we move forward, we really have an ear to where people's passion is, and we don't get stuck in our process. I think that's something that we've, as a United Methodist Church, as a church that really has a lot of processes, sometimes we get stuck in that, and we kind of hinder ministry because of it. Not intentionally, obviously, but things get lost in the approval process, or the needing to have a quorum, or things like that. And so one of the big changes that we're looking to make this year, one of the creative ways that we're hoping to move forward as a church, is through this governance change. And I know you've heard me talk about it, but I'm talking about it again because this coming Monday night, our church council will be meeting to vote on the proposal that the small group that over the summer that was meeting has finished. And if church council approves that vote, it will be added to the charge conference agenda this fall for the entire church to vote on. I say entire church, I mean entire church membership. You do need to be a member of First United Methodist to have a vote on this. Which, by the way, we're adding new members again this week. How cool is that? God is up to something. If you are interested in joining the church, please let me know. If I have enough, I'll actually do a class. Right now, I've been kind of just meeting with people individually, but if I've got a group that are interested, I would love to sit down with you and do a little class, but that's besides the point. Anyway, so the church council is going to be meeting this Monday night to go over it and to vote on it, to put it on our church conference agenda. If that passes, then we're going to make those proposal plans available to anyone, and we're going to get them up in a variety of ways. We're going to put it out in as many ways as we can. We want you to see it. We want you to ask questions. We want you to read over it, reflect on it, pray about it. Because part of what it's going to require is a small group of people who are very committed to what God is asking us as a church to do, and who God is asking us to be. One of the changes that is part of this proposal is creating a leadership team that will handle all of the administrative business of the church. So the ministry side of things, the ministry focus, the areas of like discipleship and children and youth and worship and missions and stuff, that all falls under me as the pastor. So I kind of get to help direct and guide that. The people that are working in those areas report back to me. But we also have an administrative side of the church, and that's the business of the church. That's, how we handle our finances. That's how we handle our insurance. That's how we handle our building and physical properties. That's how we handle kind of our HR side of things. We do have staff. We do have, people that we need to hire, and, different things like that. That's all the business side of the church. And as the pastor, I have voice in those things, but I actually don't even vote because I'm not a member of this church. I'm a member of the annual conference. And so the leadership team that we are proposing will take on that work. That's the work that's done by finance trustees and SPPRC. They will become the leadership team and do that work together. And in order to be on that leadership team, you need to be a member of the church, and you need to apply. That's something that's going to change. Instead of like begging people to serve the church, we want people that are invested to really make those kind of business decisions that are going to be the best for the church, that are Christ-like. I'm still going to be there. I'm still going to have voice. I'm still going to have influence. But really, this is the part of the church that you as the people of the church need to own. Because at the end of the day, this is your church. I love this church. I am here to serve this church. I am here to do my best to shepherd and to guide you spiritually in your discipleship. But you also have to own the work that we do together as well. And so that's one of the ways that we are hoping to move forward creatively in the life of the church, is by switching up our governance a little bit, and kind of the way that we're handling some of our smaller groups, and the way that we're dealing with having kind of staff over some things, and switching things up a little bit. But again, in the hope that it's the best thing for the church. It's the best thing for us as a church to live into the mission and ministry that God has called us to do. Why we are here, why we exist, what's the point of our church here in Yankton. That's ultimately what we're making decisions for. And so that's one of the ways that I believe that we are trying to live creatively into the future. We're trying to do a new thing. Remember, I talked about in the sermon how the leaders in Jerusalem made a decision that the church would look very different than what they had ever known, that the Gentiles who were coming in would not be subject to the same laws that the Jews had been subject to their entire life, and that moving forward things would look different. And that's a scary thing. We're in that same position right now. We're moving forward, we're looking at things to be a little bit different. And that's a scary thing, or it can be, but it doesn't have to be. Because change can be good, change can be God-breathed. And I believe that that was true in Jerusalem all those years ago. And I believe that is true for our church right now. That we are in a time of refining, that we are in a time of remembering who we are called to be, what we are about, and really focusing our time and energy on those things. Because frankly, let's be honest for a minute, a lot of us have limited time, limited energy to focus. And so as the pastor of this church, one of the things I think about is, how do I not waste people's time? How do I not waste people's energy? I want to make sure that people are plugged in, but they're plugged into things that give them life, that give them purpose, that they see how it's changing, they see how it's having an effect on people, because that's what people want to be involved in. That's going to make the decision for someone to say, do I put my time in this or do I put my time in that? As the church, I want to make sure that all the things that we are doing are things that God is leading us in, and that are going to have an impact, that are going to be important, that are going to change lives, including our own lives. And so know that if we're asking you to do something, it is my hope and prayer that whatever that thing is going to be worth your time, that it's going to be worth your investment to do. That it's not just idle roles to fill. That's one of the models that we kind of want to move away from, and we really want to move to, how do we plug people into a vibrant ministry that gives them life and purpose, so that they are willing to spend that time away. They are willing to come to the church. They are willing to bring their families. That's something I think about a lot, because as my family is growing, I spend a lot of time at the church, and, each week my husband will ask me, how many nights are you gone this week? Because if it's really more than 3 nights a week, he starts to feel like a single parent a little bit. And it's really hard for our family. And I know that that's true for many families, that there's a lot of obligations. And so we want to make sure that we are being creative in the ways that we're helping to support and love families, that we're being creative in the ways that we are helping to disciple people, and that we are being creative and effective in the ways that we are asking people to give of their time and of their energy and of their life. We don't take that for granted, but we also are always looking for more people with ideas, more people with thoughts. I was just thinking, what if we did this? It doesn't ever hurt to put that out into the world. You don't know how that might be the seed that we need to start something new, or to come up with a better way to do something that's more effective, that's reaching people in a better way. So I just want to encourage you in that we are always open for your ideas, for your thoughts, for your creative juices to be flowing as well. And that leads me into the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about that I'm super excited about, and that is starting next week on Tuesdays at noon, so over the lunch hour, I'm going to be teaching a class called Discipleship, Women in Church History. Now, this is a class that I wrote, actually, and I'm constantly tweaking. I've actually got my stack of books out again. This is my favorite topic, probably in all of the world. I love studying women in church history. And you might be thinking, oh, a women's study? I don't really want to do that. It is women, but what we're looking at in particular is how the definition of a faithful disciple, like a woman of Christ, has changed over time and has evolved and adapted, and how the roles of women in the church have evolved and adapted, and how at times they were silenced, and how women challenged the way things were, and how women have just continued to be a part of what God is doing in the world. And to me, that fits into this idea of act with creativity, because, women challenge things, and we see throughout church history how there's this evolution and this change of what it means to be faithful as a disciple, as a woman. Sometimes, so when someone says, well, this is the only way to be a Christian woman, that might be the only way that they've known in their lifetime. But if we look over the course of 2,000 years of church history, we see that there have been many ways to be a woman in Christ, and that these narrow definitions that we sometimes have, or this is how the church has always been, is really challenged when we start to look at 2,000 years of church history. Anything that we have in the way that we do church today is very different than the way that church has been done in the past. So, I could take any topic and follow its trajectory throughout church history and see the evolution of it. One that would be very interesting, that's not really in my wheelhouse super well, I guess, would be music, looking at music, and how people have really strong feelings around music and worship, and what kind of music, or what should and shouldn't be allowed, and how, it evolved over time. At one point, the organ was the new fancy instrument on the street, and people were not sure that the organ should be in church. And now that's kind of the most traditional instrument we think of and associate with the church. Now guitars are a pretty common thing in church. At one time, that wasn't the case. Not that long ago. I just watched someone who is a professional bagpipe player say that there are churches that believe that the bagpipes are connected to the devil, and so they won't allow bagpipes in a church. So, that's interesting. So, we can really look at it through any lens. Women happens to be the lens that is most interesting for me. And so that's what I'm going to teach on. But again, it's this idea of opening up the possibilities of what church has looked like, what church can look like, what worship has been, what worship can be, and how we be faithful to God, and also faithful to ourselves as people that God made. I think that's important as well. And so I really encourage you that if you have the opportunity to take an hour on Tuesdays over lunch to come to the church, grab your lunch, bring it with you as we talk about, and each week we're going to be doing a different era. I'm just going to be walking through different eras in the history of the church, picking out some women that kind of highlight some of the themes that we're going to talk about each week. I'm super excited about it. Like I said, this is my favorite topic in all the world. And so I'm definitely going to nerd out about it a little bit, but I'm very excited, and I hope that you would consider joining me for that. Men and women, I've had men in every class that I've done this with, and who have found it very useful, very eye-opening. And so I just want to put that out there, that's available and that's coming up. But at the end of the day, all of this is really about our mission. It's really about the core of who we are and what we are called to do. When we are called to act creatively and to trust in God and to trust in God's guidance, that maybe where God is leading us is somewhere we have yet to be, that's uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Again, it goes back to what is it that we are here for, and we're here to help make disciples. To bring new people into the fold, not just for numbers' sake, not just for our church's sake, but really for their sake. Because if we truly believe that new life in Christ is everything that we say it is, we would want that for everybody. And then also to deepen our own faith. And especially as we continue in difficult waters in the world, in our country, in our lives, as we face difficult things, as we are continually bombarded with messages that are conflicting each other, let us have a solid foundation in Christ. Let us have a solid foundation in what we know to be true of God's love, of God's forgiveness, of God's grace. Let us reflect that in our own lives to a world that is so desperately in need of some compassion, in need of people that are willing to listen, willing to put themselves out there for the sake of love. It's my hope that we as a church will be that kind of people. And I know that we are, and that we can always grow into it more. And so it is my prayer that as you go throughout this week, you will act boldly, and creatively. And if I don't see you here on Wednesday night in one of the many ways that you can come, I hope to see you on Sunday in worship, or perhaps next Tuesday in the new study that I'll be doing. Until then, God bless and have a great week. Thank you for joining us on this episode of What's Going On, a video and audio podcast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. We'd love to have you join us for worship on Sundays, and we have two options available. 9 a.m. is our contemporary service, and 10:30 a.m. is our traditional service. You can find those online as well at our website, www.firstumcyankton.org, or on YouTube.